All right, welcome back for another deep dive. Today, we're tackling property development feasibility studies.
Ooh, sounds exciting.
It is. These things are basically like business plans,
Get
but
it?
specifically for taking a piece of land and turning it into something new, developing it.
Okay, yeah, I get it.
So we've got a bunch of sources for this deep dive, some articles, some videos, all that good stuff.
Cool.
Our mission here is to help you guys understand just how important these feasibility studies are.
Yeah, because they can really help you avoid some major mistakes.
Huge. Like, think about it. There's this quote right at the beginning of one of our sources. The battle is won before it's ever fought.
Wait, isn't that Sun Tzu from The Art of War?
It is. He's talking about military strategy, of course, but it applies perfectly here.
I see what you mean. Because with development, you're not just passively waiting, you're actually creating something.
Exactly. It's way more active than just, say, buying and holding a property.
And way more can go wrong, too.
For sure. And that's where these studies come into, like, your battle plan, helping you anticipate those pitfalls and make way smarter decisions.
Right, so you're not just jumping in blind.
So let's break it down. Why should anyone listening care about this stuff, even if they're not planning to build a skyscraper tomorrow?
Well, first and foremost, it's all about figuring out if a project is actually going to be profitable.
Like, will it actually make money?
Exactly. These studies act as an early warning system. They can save you from wasting tons of time and money on a project that just won't work financially.
Makes sense.
I see so many new developers get all excited about a piece of land and jump right in without crunching the numbers.
Oof, that's gotta hurt.
Yeah, a feasibility study can be a real reality check, which can be a good thing sometimes.
Definitely. And it's not just about avoiding losses.
Right. A good feasibility study can also help you test out different ideas and refine your plans before you even start building.
Oh, I like that.
You can play around with different scenarios, like what if we built apartments instead of townhouses, or what if construction costs go way up?
It's like a sandbox for your development ideas.
Exactly. You can make mistakes on paper where they don't cost you an arm and a leg.
So much better than making them in real life.
Right. And even if you're already an experienced developer, a feasibility study can give you that extra confidence boost and help you secure funding.
Yeah, because banks and investors want to see that you've done your homework.
Of course. They want to know you're not just winging it.
It shows you're serious and that you've thought things through.
Exactly. It's all about minimizing risk and maximizing your chances of success.
And to do that, you need a solid plan based on real data and analysis.
Couldn't agree more. So, now that we know why these studies are so important, let's take a peek inside, shall we?
Let's do it. What are the main sections we're going to find in one of these things?
Well, first up, you've got the property description.
Okay, so that's where you lay out all the nitty-gritty details about the land itself.
Exactly. Location, size, zoning, existing structures, you name it.
You're basically painting a picture of the land for anyone reading the study.
Right, so they understand the canvas you're working with.
I like that analogy.
Then comes the proposed development. This is where you get to unveil your grand vision.
Ooh, the fun part.
You'll have detailed plans, elevations, maybe even some fancy 3D renderings.
I bet that's where you get all the oohs and ahs.
For sure. But it's not all about pretty pictures, right? You got to know if there's actually a market for what you're building.
Right, because you could build the most amazing development in the world, but if nobody wants to live or work there, what's the point?
Exactly. That's where market research comes in.
So you're figuring out who your target audience is, what they want, and how much they're willing to pay.
Right. You need to analyze the competition and see how your development fits into the bigger picture.
So you're not just building in a vacuum. You're thinking strategically about how this project will actually succeed in the real world.
Absolutely. And once you have a good grasp of the market, you need a solid plan to actually get this project built.
Makes sense.
That's where critical path analysis comes in. It's a project management tool that helps you map out the entire timeline, identify potential bottlenecks, and make sure everything stays on track.
Oh, so it's like a giant flowchart for your entire development project.
Pretty much. But perhaps the most important part of any feasibility study is the financial analysis.
Ah, yes, the numbers.
This is where you crunch all the numbers, estimate your costs, project your revenues, and calculate your potential return on investment.
This is where the rubber meets the road, right? It's about figuring out if this project makes financial sense.
Exactly. And not just in a general sense, you'll use something called sensitivity analysis to see how your profits might change if things like interest rates or construction costs go up.
So you're not just hoping for the best, you're planning for the worst case scenario too.
Precisely. And if you're looking for funding, you'll need a few more things in your feasibility study, like a formal property valuation, a detailed marketing plan, and information about your experience and track record as a developer.
So you're basically saying, hey, we're the right people for this job, trust us.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got the big picture of what's inside a feasibility study.
Right.
But now let's dive into the nitty-gritty of development costs.
Let's do it.
Our sources have this handy-dandy developer's equation that breaks it all down.
Okay, lay on me.
Value equals land costs, plus building costs, plus financial costs, plus profit.
Seems simple enough, but I have a feeling it's more complicated than that.
Oh, you bet it is. Each of those components is like a Pandora's box.
Oh, I can imagine.
So let's start with land acquisition costs, because a lot of new developers get tripped up here.
Yeah, they just focus on the purchase price and forget about all the hidden costs.
Like what? Give me some examples.
Well, think about things like stamp duty, legal fees, surveys, environmental assessments.
All right, all those things add up quickly.
They really do. And if you're not careful, they can eat into your profit margin big time.
That makes sense. You're not just writing a check for the land. There are all these extra expenses involved.
Right. And then, of course, you've got to finance the whole thing, which brings us to financial costs.
Okay, break that down for me.
So you've got debt capital, which is the money you borrow from banks or other lenders.
Okay,
And then you've got equity, which is your own money that you're putting into the project.
gotcha.
And it's not just about the interest rates. You also have to consider the opportunity cost.
Which is?
What else could you be doing with that money if you weren't tying it up in this development?
Ah, I see. That's a good point. It's about making sure this project is the best use of your capital, not just financially, but in terms of your time and energy, too.
Exactly.
Oh, and we can't forget about the team you need to put together. All the experts, the architects, engineers, surveyors, lawyers, all of them,
Right. All those professional fees can really add up.
especially for a big project.
Yeah, and it's so important to get accurate cost estimates up front from everyone.
Yeah, you don't want to get hit with some surprise bill halfway through.
Exactly. And then there's the fun part, dealing with the local councils,
Oh, yeah, the council.
all their regulations, all their fees.
I bet those can be a real headache.
They can. Council contributions, they call them.
What are those exactly?
Well, it's basically fees for development approvals, building permits, sometimes even contributions to offset the impact your project might have on local infrastructure.
So, like, if you're building a big apartment complex, you might have to contribute to improving the roads or the parks nearby.
Exactly. And those fees, they can vary a lot depending on where you're building and how big your project is.
I bet. It's like a whole other layer of complexity on top of everything else.
It is. And then on top of that, you've got utility connection fees for water, electricity, gas, all that.
Oh, right. I didn't even think about those.
Yeah, those can add up too, especially for larger developments.
Okay, so we've got the land, the financing, the professionals, the councils. Now let's talk about the big one, construction costs.
The heart of it all.
This is usually the biggest part of the budget, right?
Yeah, usually the biggest chunk by far.
And probably the trickiest to estimate accurately.
It can be. Our sources talk about using per square meter or per square rates.
So you can say, okay, it's going to cost this much to build each square meter of space.
Yeah, it gives you a rough idea, but of course it varies a lot depending on the materials you use, the finishes, how complex the design is.
Right, so a luxury condo is going to cost way more per square meter to build than a basic warehouse.
Exactly. And then you've got to factor in the risk of cost fluctuations, prices of materials, and labor. They're always changing.
So how do you deal with that?
Well, there are construction indices that track these changes, so you can try to anticipate them, but there are always surprises.
It sounds like a constant battle to stay ahead of those rising costs.
It can be. That's why experienced developers always build in a contingency. It's basically a buffer, usually around 5–10% of the construction costs, just to cover any unforeseen issues that might pop up.
So it's like a safety net, just in case things go wrong, which, let's be honest, they often do in construction.
Exactly. And on top of all that, you've got marketing and selling costs, insurance premiums, and of course, taxes.
It's enough to make your head spin.
I know, right? But wait, there's more.
Oh, no. What else?
Our sources actually point out some surprising ways that developers can generate extra income from a development site.
Really? Like what?
Well, for example, if there are existing trees on the property, those can actually be worth a lot of money.
I never would have thought of that.
Yeah, some palm trees, for instance, can sell for up to $1,000 each in some markets.
Wow. So even removing trees can become a revenue stream.
It can. And if there's an old house on the property, you can either relocate it or demolish it, and that can bring in anywhere from $15,000 to $65,000, depending on its condition.
That's a nice little bonus.
Yeah, it can help offset some of those other costs.
Makes sense. It's
Right.
all about being resourceful, right?
Yeah,
Finding creative ways to maximize your return on investment.
exactly. But now let's talk about a really crucial concept that underlies every property development feasibility study:
Okay, I'm intrigued. What is it?
residual land value.
Residual land value. Okay, I've heard that term before, but I'm not entirely sure what it means.
Well, it's basically the maximum amount you can afford to pay for a piece of land and still develop it profitably.
Okay, so it takes into account all those costs we just talked about, like the construction costs, the council fees, everything.
Exactly. And it also considers the projected sale prices of what you're building. So if you're building apartments, for example, what do you think you can realistically sell those apartments for?
Right, so it's about finding that sweet spot between what you pay for the land and what you can realistically sell the finished product for.
Exactly. And you need to be able to cover all your expenses and still make a decent profit.
Otherwise, it's not really worth doing, is it?
Nope. And the source material has a great example to illustrate this.
Okay, let's hear it.
So let's say a developer wants to build 4 townhouses, and they're hoping to sell each one for $530,000.
Okay, so that's over $2 million in total revenue.
Right. But the land seller is asking for $600,000 for the property.
Oof, that's a big chunk of their potential profit right there.
It is. That works out to $150,000 in land cost per townhouse.
So before they even start building, a quarter of their potential revenue is already gone.
Exactly. And to make a decent profit, considering all the other costs involved, they'd probably need to sell each townhouse for closer to $575,000.
But what if the market just won't support that price?
Then they're in trouble.
They're stuck.
Exactly. And that's the key takeaway here. Overpaying for land can completely kill a project, no matter how great your plans are.
So it's not just about finding a great piece of land, it's about understanding its true value in relation to what you want to build on it.
Absolutely. And that's where those sophisticated feasibility software tools come in.
Oh yeah, our sources mentioned those. What did you tell me about them?
Well, there are different levels of software depending on how complex the project is. You've got validation feasibility software, sometimes called a quick FISO.
A quick Feasel?
Yeah, it's basically a quick and dirty assessment to see if a project is even worth investigating further.
So it's like a first date for a development project, just seeing if there's a spark.
Exactly. And if that first date goes well, then developers move on to more comprehensive software that lets them really dive deep into the financials, model different scenarios, really stress test their plans.
So they can see how things like rising interest rates or construction costs might affect their bottom line.
Precisely. And the cool thing is, this advanced feasibility study becomes a living document that guides the entire development process.
So they're not just creating it and then forgetting about it.
Not at all. They're constantly tracking their progress against those initial projections, monitoring their cash flow, and making adjustments to their plans as needed.
So it's like having a financial GPS for their development project.
Exactly. And they can even use these tools to create detailed construction draw schedules.
What are those?
They basically outline when and how funds will be dispersed throughout the construction process.
So it's all about maintaining control and making sure the project stays on track, both financially and from a timeline perspective.
Exactly. And these software tools also let developers run those what-if scenarios we talked about earlier, like what happens if interest rates go up or construction costs skyrocket.
So they can identify potential risks and come up with ways to mitigate those risks.
Exactly. But it's important to remember that a feasibility study isn't just about the numbers.
Right, there's more to it than just crunching data and running simulations.
Absolutely. There are also those important qualitative factors to consider, like the developer's experience and track record.
Makes sense. Investors and lenders want to know that the people behind the project actually know what they're doing.
Right. They want to see a history of success, a deep understanding of the development process, a team that can handle the inevitable challenges that come up.
It's about trust and confidence, right? You're basically saying, hey, we've done this before, we know how to get it done, and we're going to deliver on our promises.
Exactly. And another crucial qualitative factor is a well-crafted marketing plan.
Right, because at the end of the day, you need to be able to sell those units or rent out those spaces to make the whole thing work.
Absolutely. The marketing plan highlights the development's unique selling points, identifies the target market, and outlines the strategies you'll use to reach potential buyers or tenants.
So it's about creating a compelling story, something that resonates with people and makes them want to be a part of this development.
Exactly. And speaking of selling, our sources also emphasize the importance of having a clear exit strategy.
Oh yeah, that's something I wanted to ask about. What exactly does an exit strategy entail?
It's basically knowing how and when you're going to realize your profits from the development.
So will you sell the units individually, hold on to them for rental income, or maybe do a bit of both?
Right. Having that exit strategy in mind from the beginning can really help you make smarter decisions throughout the entire development process.
Like having a roadmap for your investment journey.
Exactly. And when we come back for the final part of our deep dive, we'll explore some additional insights from our sources that can help you navigate this complex world of property development with confidence.
Can't wait. Welcome back. Ready for the final stretch of our property development feasibility deep dive?
I am. We've covered a lot of ground.
We have. But, like they say, it's all in the details.
Or pro.
One thing that really stuck with me from our sources was how important it is for developers to showcase their track record and credentials.
Oh, yeah, that's huge.
It's all about building that trust with investors and lenders, right?
Absolutely. You got to prove you can walk the walk.
Exactly. It's like saying, hey, we've done this before, we know the ropes, and we're going to get this done right.
And our sources actually give some good tips on how to do that.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
Things like including summaries of past projects, financial statements, maybe even references from happy clients or partners.
It's like building a portfolio of your accomplishments.
Exactly. It shows you're the real deal.
And speaking of the real deal, another thing our sources talk about is the importance of forecasting in property investment.
Ah, yes. Trying to predict the future.
Which is never easy, especially in real estate.
You're telling me.
Yeah.
But developers use all sorts of tools and techniques to try to anticipate market trends, assess those potential risks.
It's like trying to solve a puzzle with some of the pieces missing.
It is. Our sources mention things like market analysis, financial modeling, even looking at historical data.
So it's about understanding those forces that drive the real estate market, supply and demand, interest rates, the economy.
And being able to adapt your plans as things change.
Because they always do, right?
Always. Speaking of adapting, our sources also talk about the importance of having a clear exit strategy right from the start.
Right, that's how you actually make money.
Exactly. You need to know how and when you're going to realize those profits, whether you're going to sell the units, rent them out, or maybe do a combination of both.
Having that exit strategy in mind from the beginning, it's like having a destination in mind when you set out on a journey.
It guides your decisions along the way.
Exactly. And it all comes back to that initial feasibility study. It's like the foundation for the whole project.
It really is.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one key takeaway you want our listeners to remember?
I think it's that knowledge is power. The more you understand about property development, the better decisions you make, the fewer risks you'll take, and the more successful you'll be.
Whether you're a seasoned pro or just starting out, learning about feasibility analysis is a must.
It's about taking control of your real estate destiny.
Love that. Well, that's it for our deep dive into property development feasibility studies.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. And remember, even if you're not a developer, understanding these concepts can help you make smarter decisions when it comes to your own real estate investments.
Always a good thing.
That's it for this episode. We'll catch you next time for another deep dive.